Hi, hello and welcome. Thank you for turning up tonight to this info evening, and also hello to those of you who are watching online. Just so especially you who are in the room knows, this is going to be online until the application deadline. So questions you ask and such will be available for others to see. So my name is Laura Nandrup Black. I'm head of the MFA in Dance and Participation. And Rasmus Ølme is here as well, and he'll talk a bit later. He's head of the MFA in Choreography. So we'll start off by talking about the MFA in Dance and Participation, then we'll do some questions, have a little break, and then the same thing for Choreography. But if you have any sort of clarifying questions on the way, just fire away, okay? So just to briefly situate this education, for those of you who don't know it, we are now in this amazing space at the Philip de Lange's Allé, which is the spaces for dance and choreography, predominantly at this school. And the school is a Danish National School of Performing Arts, and we have this campus here in Copenhagen, and we also have campuses in Odense, and in Aarhus and Fredericia. So we're part of a bigger school. You can study lots of different things within performing arts. I will tonight try and whiz through these. I'll talk a little bit about structure and content of the education. I'll speak very briefly about possibilities for exchange and the kind of networks that we're part of. Then I'll talk a little bit about the application process, and then, as I said, we'll do some questions in the end. So this is what we promise in the curriculum. It says the Master of Fine Arts program in Dance and Participation educates professionally practicing dancers and choreographers who wish to combine artistic and pedagogic practice with a view to develop and carry out artistic projects in which the participants' physical, social, and creative experiences are central. So there's already here you can see kind of a narrowing down of the participatory field. So participation within arts can be a lot of different things, right? But here we're focusing on the ones where you are taking care of the participants' experience in a kind of sort of nurturing way, or in an ethical, respectful way, I could say. So that's the sort of narrowing down that we're doing. So there's something about engaging and proposing and challenging the participant experience. But it's also about finding ways to let that engagement with people feed back into your own practice, so that you can also become challenged yourself. So the idea is not that you do an artistic practice and then you kind of deliver it to the people, but that you, in collaboration with others, can find things, ways of working that can affect you in your practice as well. So a typical student here, there is not really a typical student, but typically it's people who want to sort of pull away from a career. So typically it's people who have been going for a while and are sort of looking for other ways to engage with people. But that doesn't mean that you can't apply if you are just out of your bachelor's education. It's totally possible. And also if you're finishing this year, this is true for all our MFAs out here, you can apply even though you are in your last year of your bachelor. So people who come here typically want to take a critical look at their own practice. And they're probably looking to have their presumptions in their work not sort of, have them shaken a little bit, not overruled, but have them shaken and questioned a little bit. And maybe they're looking for sort of a different focus or path in their work. You don't need to have a predefined project to get in. So you don't have to come in and say, my mission is to build this place and do that thing and that. I mean, you can have, but you don't have to. And maybe actually it's as good not to have it, because things might happen on the way that totally shakes the thing that you thought you were going to do. It's most often an international group who studies here, and the working language is English. I want to bring this in. It's a quote by Claire Bishop, and she's speaking here in a sort of a narrower context than the one we're talking about, but I think there's something interesting in it. If we look at this last paragraph here, she talks about art as pedagogy, and she said that this kind of art needs to face both the art itself and the social side and the subsequent audiences that might be for this kind of art to take place. And what it says here is it needs to be successful within both art and the social field, and this is important, but ideally testing and revising the criteria we apply in both domains. So this is sort of also an underlying thought in the way that this curriculum is put together. Like you need to take care of and stimulate the art, you need to take care of and stimulate the social side of your work. But you also need to not just nurture it, but also push it a little bit in terms of what would normally happen in those arenas, and let them push each other. This also means that because the students who are here typically are skilled artists already, to start with initially at least, there's more focus on the social side, on pedagogy and such, to sort of balance that out so you have knowledge and practice in both areas that you can then work from. And how do we do that then? I think one thing that's important to say is that it's not an education that dictates one particular method. When you're a student here, you will meet a lot of different approaches, and it's up to you to fish things from that and alter things from that and combine things in a way that's you want to shape, that helps you shape your practice. Let's look at the overall structure just to see what actually happens inside this course. You can see here, this is time, first, second, third, and fourth semester. And these are the kind of subjects that you meet. So there are kind of two kinds. There's what we call subject modules, and then there's project modules. Project modules are typically things where there's a lot of independent work for the student. So it's a project that's being carried out by them. And subject modules typically have a bit more taught work. So you can see here, in the beginning, you have a little bit of contextualization. So ECTS points sort of indicate how much time is spent on each thing. So contextualization could be sort of knowledge that supports your thinking in different way. So it could be something, it could be dance history. It could be taking different themes, maybe looking at virtuosity in the context of participation, etc., 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 and unfold them. Typically, it'll be lectures and things like this. But it could also be workshops. Pedagogy and creative practice, you can see, is quite heavy in terms of the workload, overall workload. And this is, as I said, because this is kind of the side of the work that we need to nurture in order to know what we want to do with it, and then tweak it a bit also. The projects we have is artistic research, which is about finding ways to work on artistic inquiry and unfolding one's own projects within that. Performance project is a project where you work with participants and create a performance of some sort. And then the graduation project, you'll see the last semester is dedicated totally to the graduation project. So there's quite a substantial project that you carry out on your own, and where you hand in different formats of documentation and a thesis in the end, which is partially written. So the working methods, just to kind of get an idea of what could it actually look like to be in here and be a student. Classes and lectures can be studio practice. It can be more discursive things. So it can be discussion-based things. Often we have practitioner researchers as teachers. So it's not necessarily that you only sit down with a teacher or you're only on the floor with a teacher. Often they do both. And we'll combine both so that you will work both with things as this kind of material and as this kind of material. Workshops can be short encounters with artists who we think, or I think, will prod people's practice, inspire them or push them. This can also very typically be with the other MFA courses. Most notable, of course, our MFA in choreography, but we also have an MFA in performing arts, and we could also sometimes have encounters with them in workshops. Placements with supervisions in connection to some subjects. There'll be some placements. This could be either in set context, so let's say a museum or school, etc., but it could also sometimes be in electable contexts. Assignment and hand-in, I want to say something about that, because there is quite a lot of reading, there's quite a lot of writing. And some of it is, let's say, artistic material, and some of it is scholarly material. So this is sort of a habit to get into that if you come from an artistic background where that hasn't been so present. So it takes a little work to get into it. But I do want to stress that it's not something you need to have experience with to be here, and it's also, say if you're dyslexic, or we'll figure it out, it's not a problem. It's not a prerequisite for being here. There's other ways about it that we can figure out. And the same goes for the assignments, so the hand-ins that there are. Some of them are written, but again, you don't have to have a lot of experience with writing. It's something that we can figure out as we go along. And we're also always looking for ways for the individual student to write in a way that supports their thinking the best. So you can approach it as a practice that you need to figure out with help from the teachers. Yeah, study trips can be anything from day trips to longer trips in the good old days abroad, but recently sort of more close to home. This year group, Søren is here, who's a current student, and we went to Bornholm. Other groups went to South Africa. Yeah, so we'll see what the future brings. Now, Bornholm was great. Yes, it was great, yeah. So this looks very square. In reality, things are not divided like this, really. So often we'll work around a specific theme, and there'll be lots of different sort of ways of engaging with the stuff in there. So just to have an example, the performance project is a project where the students decide who they want to work with and how, and then they have to produce a performance that would typically be shown in this space. Now this can be with the participants itself, or it could be also that's not either what the student's interested in. They're interested in finding other ways of engaging with people that can feed into a performance situation, or sometimes it's just you thought it was going to be possible, but it's not. So that's an example of a project where there'll be some kind of there'll be some contextualization in there. There maybe be some workshops with some artists who might be interested. There'll be some supervision, etc., etc. So there'll be lots of different. There'll be a hand in the end, the reflection format that you have to hand in the end. So lots of different formats into each chunk of the education. And these chunks are not always do one chunk and finish it, do one chunk and finish it. So very often they'll overlap, so that you have to find your way through it. Yeah. But it's very important, I just want to say this again, that we're really trying to find or offer different modes of learning and reflecting. So it's through doing, it's also through a more sort of, let's call it cerebral thinking, all kinds of ways and all kinds of different mediums. One more thing I want to say about this is that the group is really important to itself, so to speak. So the kind of feedback that's established between the group members and the kind of knowledges that the people on the education bring in need to be activated and shared. So it's super important, this kind of setting up a good group dynamic like that. And I think at the end of the day, this is where you get a lot of your education from, actually, is this kind of exchange. Yeah, you know what it's like being a busy artist and then to all of a sudden have the possibility to just pull yourself into another context for, well, 2 years, it's a luxury, right? and then with the same group, it gives something quite unique. This group is also will somewhat dictate what actually goes on in the education. So read the curriculum, it's online, and it'll say exactly what you can expect to get from the education, but know that the content that's fit into those boxes can be tailored quite a lot in relation to the individuals that are on the education and the group itself, and it will be. Any special interest, anything that needs more work, etc., will be taken into consideration. The teachers on the education is mainly guest teachers. So I teach, Rasmus teach, Kim teach, he's also here on the faculty. So the faculty does teach occasionally, but there's a lot of guest teachers, mainly international guest teachers that come and teach on this course. And often they will come, some just come once and many come twice, so they have a possibility to follow up on the learning process. Yeah. I'm going to say a little bit about exchange possibilities, and it's because in the past I'm often asked about this. Is it possible to do collaborations with the other schools? We're out here in Holmen, which is an area with a lot of different art schools, architecture school, film school, one of our rhythmic music conservatoires in Denmark. And many are interested in nurturing those kind of connections. So it is possible to do different kinds of exchanges. We have, there's other educations here at the school, and of course it will predominantly be with the other MFAs, but if a student has a particular interest, it's possible to figure out a way of participating in other educations, teaching. It's also now very possible to do shorter courses at other art educations in Denmark. So that's within film, it's classical music, rhythmical music, and it's visual arts. Those schools are obliged to open up courses for each other, and we also open up courses here so that students can come and partake in them. It's quite an easy process, and it's if you're interested in cross-disciplinary work, and transdisciplinary work, then this is a possibility, and it's even a possibility from now on to do an electable transdisciplinary course. So if you're interested in that, it's now possible. I'm very pleased about that. Then it's also possible to do international exchange. It's possible to do up to 1 semester somewhere else in the world. In reality, so far, it's never happened in this education. I think because it's so dense, and you feel like you want it all, kind of, for it to make sense. But it's a possibility, definitely. There are also some international networks that we as a school and as an education are part of. Something like Dance and Choreography International, Nordic Forum of Dance. But most notable, what I want to mention here is a network called Glomus, which is a global gathering, a gathering of global art institutions, predominantly performing arts and music, who meet on camps. I think it's every other year, normally, different places in the world. And these camps are just an amazing melting pot of learning and meetings and finding ways to engage with one another and each other's proposal of what art is and could be and should do in the world, which is vastly different. So it's kind of like a really nice kick in the face where all your presumptions are kind of like out the window. And for the students who enroll in the autumn, this will be the first thing that happens to them. However, it will not be in Brazil, Natal, like this. It will be in Aarhus, which is also lovely. Also lovely. But there will be 150 students and teachers from all over the world coming to that. So I think we can make Aarhus feel different. But it's quite an intensive start. So this is why I want to mention it here. So it's straight into that. I think it's 10, 12 days with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a word about the application process. So first of all, who is qualified? You need to have a bachelor in arts or a 4-year education in arts to get to qualify for the education. But it can also be another artistic education that in scope or level is equivalent to a bachelor's. And if you're in doubt about whether your education qualifies you, you can contact us. You can write me directly, and it's not me who decides, but I'll make sure that we find out whether you're qualified. So that if you're in doubt, you don't have to go through the whole application process just to be told, sorry. I mean, you can't even apply. That would be a shame. The application is in 2 rounds. The first round is a written submission. You have to apply on an online portal. This goes for both the education we're talking about tonight. You find it on our website, ddsks.dk. You have to use the portal in there and make sure to upload all the documents that are asked for, and make sure to read what you're asked to upload, so the right amount of words, etc., etc. The deadline is Tuesday, March the 15th at 12:00 Danish time. Then after that, there's a selection round. The panel will make a selection and decide who to invite for the audition. And the people who are called for audition will come here to Copenhagen and do different kinds of workshops. And that takes place on the 22nd to the 24th of April. So for that, you are asked to prepare a task to present. You'll be partaking in creative and collaborative tasks on the spot. There'll be movement class, and there's also an interview. But the people who are selected will get quite a lot more information about that. We have an intake every other year, and we take 5 to 7 students. That was it. Questions? Oh, I'm going to give you a microphone. Is that okay? Yeah. So the people at home can. There you go. Thanks.
The online formula, can we begin and fill up the first page and then put a pause and come back the day after? Or once you begin to fill it up, you have to do it?
Good question. You can start and save without sending it in, and then you decide when you send it in. Yeah. So you can begin. Yeah. It won't spoil it. Whoop. Oh, yeah. Good question. Thank you. Søren, do you want to come up here? Because Søren is actually a student at the education, and I don't know. First of all, hello, Søren.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. Because I can answer a lot of things about the education, but Søren knows what it's like to be a student here. So he can probably answer some things better. But maybe until we're waiting for some questions, Søren, do you want to say a little bit about, maybe you can say a little bit about where you're at right now?
Yes.
And what that feels like.
All right, I will do that. Hello. We are currently entering into continuing into our graduation project. We've been having a few workshops during January to prepare to work on our content, our project content, our maybe also the formats, I guess. So, and tomorrow night we have a deadline for a research proposal. So, and then the whole of spring is what we will be dealing with. I guess managing our project, managing the participatory elements with the more reflective elements. Yeah, So that's it. That's what we're doing. That's where I'm now. It's it's a project that somehow challenges me, at least, a lot to somehow conceptualize, to figure out what is the question, what is my curiosity, and to stay with that for these months is quite the challenge somehow, but also quite, hopefully will be a good experience in the end as well. There are quite, I think Laura already mentioned somehow the frames for how we deal, with what we deal with participation and our own artistic practices are quite open, is quite open to what we somehow feel like engaging with.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a question online.
Okay.
I'm going to pass it to Rasmus, and he will share with us.
So, reading first question here, it says, what about the financial aspects of the studies?
Yeah. So I just have to go back here to get the right number. So for students from the EU and EUS, what's that in English? EEA it's called. EU or EEA, it's free. There's a small fee you pay in the beginning. I can't remember how much it is. Do you remember, Søren? It's like for copyrights. It's a very small fee. But otherwise it's free. If you're from outside of the EU or the EEA, the current tuition fee is 10,300 euros per semester. So quite a substantial chunk. It's possible to get the SU. SU is a Danish kind of financial support for students. If you are a Dane, it's pretty easy. If you are an EU citizen, correct me if I'm wrong, you can also get the SU, so the state support for students. But you have to work for a certain amount of hours in order to qualify for that. But we have staff here at the school who can help with these kind of things, help to understand the system of that. Yeah.
There's one more question here, asking the application fee, if it is one for each course, or if you can apply to different MA programs under the same fee.
You have to pay a fee for each course you apply for. So yeah. But you can definitely apply for both, and it's not something that we look at between the courses. It's not like one course hogs it. You can be offered a place in both, and then of course if you were offered a place in both, you would have to choose.
And I have one more. Here says, what specific classes are taught at the education? From which field of the art, scenekunst, are the current students from?
Yeah, so the students are from the dance and choreography field. So they are all practicing dancers and choreographers from before. Often with some facilitative experience or some kind of experience of engaging with others, but not always. It's not a prerequisite. So that's a background. You can apply, as I said, with an arts education in another field, but it's heavily dance and choreography based, this education. So when I say practice and studio practice, I'm talking about dance. That doesn't mean you cannot apply if you don't have a dance education. Maybe you're dancing in other contexts already, etc. So that is possible, but know that that is what it is about, if I understand the question right.
Yes, and I think also the guest teachers are mostly from that background as well.
Yeah, so most teachers are from that background. As I said, many are, even those who would sort of fall in the scholar/academic pile, will also very often actually have a practitioner background within dance. Not always, but often. So the person who teaches pedagogy the most, Lisa Nyberg, she's a visual artist, but is very knowledgeable in the pedagogics area. So not everyone comes from dance and choreography, but most do. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just going through them in my head just to check I'm saying the right thing. Yeah, but that's right, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, not always. So I mean, there are people who come in to teach who come from a visual arts background and have that kind of attack on participation that happens. Yeah, so I mean, there's no rules. It's not like we don't invite people who don't have a dance and choreography background, but they tend to do. Yes. That's a good point. Yeah. So those who are at home, what Søren says that it's dance in a quite broad understanding of dance. So the understanding of what choreography is and could be, what dance is and could be, is very broad. People predominantly in this education come from the what we might call contemporary dance field, but we have had people with maybe contact improvisation also falls in that category, but with a contact improvisation background or with a folk dance background we also had. So that's totally possible and quite enriching for the group actually to have a sort of diverse group. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There is another question here, or two. First one is saying perhaps this has been answered already, but what is the main difference between dance and participation and the choreography program? I mean, since I will be presenting the choreography program, I think if you stay tuned, you can also make up your own mind about the differences. But I don't know if you want to say something about it, Laura, already now.
What I would say is, well, aside from the fact that this, when you saw the overview of the things that I told, you saw pedagogy and creative practice is quite a big chunk of this course. So that sort of, let's say, new chunk of knowledge and understanding and practice is sort of for most sort of, it's new learning that you add in, and this chunk is not part of the choreography course at all. This is only for this education. So it's very different build-up. And as Rasmus says, he'll present in a second, so you hear that there are lots of differences. Maybe one to mention is that, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, Rasmus, but this is quite a heavily taught education. So you can expect to be here from early morning till quite late in the evening. I mean, a normal day might be from 9 to 5. And as with all educations here, there can also be work on weekends and evenings, and as I said, study trips, etc. But there's a lot of teaching, a lot of workshops, a lot of sort of compulsory meetings, you could say, aside from the individual projects. So that's quite heavy on that side. Maybe one thing I do want to mention is in terms of workload. Is that I mean, when I say it's full-time, it really is full-time. It's not a good idea to apply and know that you have 3 different tours coming up in the next year. Then it's better to say, okay, let someone else have that spot in the education. Yeah. So it really is, you've got to be here to get the most out of it. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that if you have the occasional little something you need to do, we'll figure it out. And sometimes it is possible to incorporate things that you have to do as a professional in the field with activities in the education. But as a starting point, it's not a good idea because you'll miss out on something. Yeah.
Okay, one more here. Does the study include the theme of a social project with amateurs who has less accessibility to dance practices, like elderly or inmates or people with different abilities?
Yes, That's the answer to that. So it varies a little bit from year to year, and maybe which groups we are engaging with as for all the students, say. But in the projects, for instance, in the performance project that I mentioned before, it's totally possible to choose a particular group that you're interested in. If you're interested in elderly people, there's a way of setting that up, and there's also a way of finding supervisors who know something particular about this particular group. We have also, for almost every year group, we have a focus on different kind of physical abilities in dance and how to deal with that as someone who wants to take responsibility for people's experience. So yes, is the short answer. There's a lot of work on how to meet different groups, how to do it in an ethically sound way that's pedagogically sound, and that's also artistically ambitious. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm.
What are your criteria for the first round?
Yeah. Mm. The first round is, of course, you send in a CV, for instance, so it's a look into what has this person done before. But I would say it's mainly about seeing what is this person's motivation. What is their idea of what this education is and where would they like to go? It's important to say in terms of the whole audition process, because it's so easy to think, oh, it's about picking the best people, but it's about picking the people that we think can gain most of the education. So maybe that's something to think about when you're doing the writing. What do I actually think? What do I actually want to gain here? What am I actually curious about? And that doesn't mean that you need to have the answers. As I said, you don't have to have a project that want to end up here, but what are your curiosities? I think this is what we're looking for, the curiosities of the individual. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now I said CV, but it's not like you have to have a track record where we can say, okay, there's some kind of progression that leads directly to this. It could be, could have done something totally different and be just totally interested in this new area. Yeah. Don't know if that answered your question, but yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, then I suggest we take a little break. For those of you who are here, I don't know if you all know the school, but if you don't, I would ask you, Søren, to take them on a little tour of the building. Perhaps it's nice. It's nice to walk anyway. And then we'll start back here, live and online, at 7 o'clock, and Rasmus will tell us about the MFA in choreography. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Tack. So, welcome back. And my turn to be presenting the MFA in Choreography. So the other MFA program that we have under the dance department here. I should say that this is a very new program. So is Dance and Participation, but it was a reformulation of a previous program. While this one started... welcome back. And my turn to be presenting the MFA in Choreography. So the other MFA program that we have under the dance department here. I should say that this is a very new program. So is Dance and Participation, but it was a reformulation of a previous program. While this one started... I should say that this is a very new program. So is Dance and Participation. Yeah, it's looping. That's why we have to wait a bit. Now I think we're good. Yeah? Let's see. Okay, so I'll start again. Presenting the MFA in Choreography. This program started in, so not even 2 years ago. So it's the first intake. And I'm having this sound still. So I'll start again. Presenting the MFA. Take den, jag har satt den ner. Eller? Okej, jag trodde jag fick den satt ner. Yeah. Now I can see. Let's see. But I had no sound on here, so we'll try again. Okay. Third try. So it's usually the good one. MFA in Choreography, new program that started soon 2 years ago. So that means that it's the first group of students that have been through the program, which also means that it's a program very much in becoming. We're and of course considered the last couple of years and the pandemic, it also has not played out quite as planned. So it's still a process. And there are some speculations from our side about what an MA program in choreography can be and how it works. So I wanted to start by mentioning something from this slide here as a kind of a conceptual sketch of different ways one could understand the MA level and different ways of understanding it that we thought about when we were constructing this program. So when going into this accreditation system that the school didn't have before and following the BA or BFA and MFA level, this idea of specialization that you would first get some kind of ground and then finally you would have a way to sort of zoom in and specialize. No? And then another way sort of thinking that you finish your BA, you're done with something, and then the MFA program is a kind of opening up into a new area. And then there is this sort of expansion saying, okay, I have a BA in one thing, but I'm moving into an MA from a different perspective, and I'm sort of broadening my own horizons. And the last one, which is then the one that I feel that we are trying to investigate, is something that I call there expanding from within. And it might not be obvious what that means, but in these circles and triangles there. But I'm thinking about it as like it's a focus on something. So just like this last circle there is like zooming in on something, but at the same time it's also looking at all of what's in there. No? So in that sense, it's not just like focusing and becoming specific, but there is also kind of opening to what that means. And it was also a little bit of a play with words in relation to this expanded notion of choreography that as it's been spoken about the last 20 years or so. And this MFA program is, the understanding of choreography is not expanded in that sense of like looking at the outskirts of choreography, like asking the question of like, what more could choreography be? So it's still focusing on a, well, what could we say, like a traditional understanding of a relationship between choreography and dance, but at the same time questioning in it and sort of opening it up a little bit to see what else that could mean. So that's how I understand this expansion from within. So it's not a question of just staying where you are. There is some kind of expansion, but it's not looking outside choreography to see what else it could be, but exploring within that frame. So that's what a kind of a visualization of the program. And then there are two main subjects. And it's physical practice and choreographic. And as you see here, there is this overlapping field in the and you see the arrow pointing down there to their mutual relation. So meaning that it's to look at how they can function together, not necessarily that they're the same. You know, so that's also why there are two separate circles here, and this idea is also a little bit based on an idea from our BA that's called BA in Dance and Choreography. So it's not just a BA in dance, and here we also thought about this like the sort of intersection between those two subjects, where it's dance and choreography. Not dance and choreography. And here also this physical practice and choreographic production, it's like not maybe focusing on where they meet, but that looking at their possible different relationships. So this expansion from within is also a way to think about, okay, how can I think physical practice in relation to a choreographic production that maybe is not necessarily producing dance? Like the outcome doesn't have to be the same as the practice. But there is a kind of way of thinking physical practice into choreographic production. And like I say, both the previous slide there with these different shapes and so on, this one, it's speculative. It's more like, what happens if we think about it like this? And how does that affect my own practice and my own ideas about producing work if I approach it from this idea? So in that sense, it's not a definition of what choreography is or should be, but it's more kind of like a conceptual framework. And then the question is like, okay, if I use that lens or this perspective, what happens to my work? So those two there, physical practice and choreographic production, are two main subjects in the curriculum. And I'll just show you a little picture of the curriculum as well, just to go through it. So you can see here, all the way to the left, it's like which semester. And so moving from up to down from first year, second year. And there are these, the modules that are called subject modules, and then there's this little add on there the Nordic choreographic platform that I'll say something about, but maybe it's more interesting to look at the last column there where it says subject. So there you see those physical practice and choreographic production coming back. And then there is something called documentation and publication. And finally there's this Nordic exchange. And the first 3 semesters look the same. Meaning that there is the subject modules of physical practice, choreographic production, and documentation and publication, and the Nordic exchange. And then it's the final 4th project module, which is just the master project. So that's an individual work that takes up the whole semester, and there's not really any teaching going on in that, although supervision, of course. So I already mentioned this physical practice and choreographic production, but I should say something about the other ones too. So the idea with this documentation and publication that is a part of each semester up until the last one is also to make sure that there is a kind of documentation going on throughout the whole program. But it's also to answer, or to prepare the students for the MA project, which in the way that it's formulated in this program, there is some kind of artwork or performance presentation, and then there is some kind of publication, and then there is an oral presentation. So the MA project is then assessed on those 3 points. So this publication is part of it, and that's also why it should be sort of continuously addressed throughout the program. Publication, in our understanding, doesn't necessarily mean like a book, or most likely not. But understanding publication through the word public, let's say, like how to make something public next to the performance presentation. So it's another form of dissemination, that where your work can take another shape in some kind of physical or digital form, so that it can be shared not just as a video of a piece of work, but in another format. So that's why this documentation and publication is part of it. And it's also a little bit of a way to introduce the students to a sort of research form of thinking. Since an MA level is also sort of research preparatory, so if someone is interested in moving on towards a PhD, it's important to have sort of introduced these documentational processes. But there is also a belief that this, maybe specifically documentation, is artistic endeavor as well. So it's not just that there is like an artistic work and then that work is being documented, but that the fact of documenting one's work also affects the process. So it's a way to assure a certain kind of reflection on the work that runs parallel to the work, and that they sort of feed off each other and sometimes meet in different shapes. So that's about the documentation and publication. Then about this Nordic choreographic platform. So when this idea came up of starting up an MA in choreography, we reached out to the MAs in choreography in Oslo and Stockholm and Helsinki to see if they were interested in starting up a sort of common studies in some form. And we have ended up starting this Nordic choreographic platform, which is then means that we're meeting up with the other 3 programs. And it can be in any of the 4 cities, but it could also be somewhere else that we meet up. Now, this has also been a little bit restricted now with the travel restrictions and so, but at least we've been able to do some of them. And next week we're doing another one. We're meeting in Helsinki. So the idea there is that the students of the 4 program meet. It can be common studies, but it can also be presentations of one's own work for each other, so a kind of peer exchange. We also make an effort to try to combine it if there's something else going on in a city. So for example, in Stockholm there was this symposium called Within Practice. So that became like all our students met there. In Helsinki next week there was supposed to be a festival. Unfortunately got cancelled, but we're still going because we have a common study program that we'll do anyway. So usually we try to hitchhike a little bit on some other event that is happening in one place, so that the students also get a chance to go see, participate in a symposium or a conference of some sort. So this is happening each semester. There is some kind of exchange there. Another example of what we managed to do was that all the 4 programs met in Norway, in Kautokeino, in the Sami University there, to get some teachings from the faculty and other artists that were active in the region there. So yeah, there was also one previous visit before we started our program, when the Oslo program and the Helsinki program met in Kilpisjärvi in the north of Finland, where there is like a climate research station that they visited, and had also different scientists and also artists in the neighborhood coming and present. So it has this Nordic focus, but it's also a lot about just getting a chance to exchange with the students in other MFA programs. We're a little bit like we're not in sync, meaning like when we have an intake here, there is also an intake in Stockholm, but not in Oslo and Helsinki. So that means that we're not, you're not necessarily meeting the same students throughout all the 4 encounters. But it also means that you get to see, in your first year, you can see people that are presenting their graduation project, because they are then in their last year. So it sort of creates a little bit of a relay between the generations as well, which was not the plan from the beginning, but actually works out quite nicely. So that's the structure of the program. The teaching itself, so I can say that similarly to dance and participation, there is not, you're not presenting a project in your application, but you are presenting your interests. It's like what it is that you're interested in developing throughout the program. But it's not like a full project that you're applying with. There are common workshops for all the students, so there is teaching that happens to the whole group. We're also, like Laura mentioned, try to collaborate as well with between the MFA programs, and sometimes also with our BFA program, even if it's just about like joining morning training if one wants to, and so on. So there is that possibility. And we've had some workshops also across the BA and MA level. Sometimes also collaborating with professional training here in Copenhagen, organized mostly by Dansehallarna. So also because it's a small group, the idea is that we have place for 4 to 6 people. So sometimes it's nice also to have some other people in. So that happens as well. There's some exchange then with the local environment in that sense. So there are some workshops and there are some sharings, between the students, presenting work for each other and so. But mostly it's supervised own work. And the supervision, so I'm the head of the program, but we are a small faculty here at the dance department, and I have 2 other colleagues that I run the program together with, which is Kim Bigas, who's here, and Malin Astner. So together, the 3 of us, we share responsibilities for the program. So supervision happens partly through the 3 of us, but also there is possibility to bring in external supervision. Yeah, so the focus, although there is common teaching and so the focus is on own work that's supervised. Let's see if there's anything else I need to say. The application process functions in the same way like dance and participation, meaning that there's a written application that you do online. There is a committee consisting of myself and some faculty teachers, student representative and an external representative. And this committee makes a selection that is then invited. So we have 2 days in April. If I remember right, it's the 6th and 7th of April. And then what happens is that there is an individual interview, but then we also gather the people that are there that day for a workshop in the afternoon. where we're sort of figuring out the system of sharing interests. So it's not so much of a workshop, but some kind of, let's say, commonly organized workspace. But it's just so that we also, that everyone gets to meet other potential candidates, and that it's not just a one-on-one all the time. So, and like I mentioned, the size of the group is thought to be somewhere between 4 and 6. Okay, I think that's it for my presentation. So I don't know, Laura, if there's any questions showing up there, or if there are any questions in the room.
Do you want to say something about the requirements for applying?
Sure. So to be eligible on the MA, it's quite similar to what Laura said. You're supposed to have a BA or an equivalent, and it should be in performing arts. But there is also some space for interpretation, depending or like claiming a sort of merit from practice. So having a BA in a related subject, but having a practice in dance and choreography that sort of allows you to be eligible as well. But yeah, the ground rule is a BA in performing arts. And I mean, since this one, as it's described there with physical practice and choreographic production, that's the focus of the program. So it's also, of course, who sees themselves in that direction is likely to have a background and an education that is related. And once again, I can just say this thing that we are asking for a certain interest that one would like to develop throughout the program. So it's not necessarily, it's also an exploration in that, no? Like there is some kind of questioning, like this seems to be something that I would like to be working on. And I guess that relates a little bit to this conceptual sketch I made there, like this sort of expansion from within, that there is both a kind of aiming for something, but at the same time also opening something up. So it's not just a kind of carrying through of an idea that one had when one applied. And just like Laura described, hopefully things happen on the way and you change your mind and so on, through the influence of the program and the peers. Yes. If there is no question, maybe I could invite Snor up, because we also have a student here in the room, just to say something about where you are at. Could I have the mic to pass on?
Anything specific?
Yeah, well, maybe you can just let them know what you are up to right now.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Snor, and yeah, I started 1.5 years ago in this program. And as you said, it's been quite a different journey than I expected to be here due to Corona that has somehow shaken it up, but also being the first generation. So it's been like figuring out together, everybody, the students and the faculty, like what is this education? So at this moment, I'm kind of returning to school. I would say I've been doing a lot of external projects, like choreographic projects here and there. And now I'm somehow returning to this building, returning to the school, figuring out like what is my choreographic practice at this moment. And it even feels like after 1.5 years, this is the moment where I'm gonna start studying. Like somehow like figuring out like, what is it I can get out of this education and this time, and yeah. So it's like very much not a linear way through this education that I'm having. So these days I'm like in the studio on my own, and then having supervision from Kim or Rasmus, and then I'm slowly gonna like start to figure out what this new research that I'm starting to do. Yeah. And right now I'm also the only student in the building, like from the choreography department. So I'm also like very much in a self-study at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I could say something about that as well. Actually, like I said, we have these students first round of the program, and none of them will be graduating this summer, both because of, like Snorre described, having too many other works that might have been postponed due to COVID and or exchange, and one student who's on maternal leave. So we will also have the pleasure to, the new students of this MFA in choreography will still also meet some of the students that are here now. Yeah, okay, microphone, wait.
There's a question here. Does the same financial setup go for Switzerland as the EU countries? So Switzerland not being an EEA or EU country?
To my knowledge, they have a specific deal that allows them to be to follow the same rules as the EU has. We have Swiss students at the BA level, and as far as I know, it's not a problem. And we also have had students that have been on exchange to a BA program in Lausanne. So Switzerland has found its way to function within these European agreements. So as far as I know, yes. All right. Well, if we don't have any further questions, I say we leave it at that. This will stay online anyway, so people also have a chance to see it afterwards. So thanks for the people who are here, thanks to the people there, and thanks to the future people who will be seeing this afterwards. Thanks for coming, and bye.